Is our last live chat of 2015, and we are really thrilled to welcome Ellen Stimson, a Vermont author, to talk about her newest book, An Old-Fashioned Christmas, perfectly timed. It is called Sweet Traditions for Hearth and Home, and one of Ellen's recipes from that book was actually just featured on Oprah.com, so congratulations for that. Ellen is also the author of Mud Season and Good Grief. She's graciously giving away a copy of An Old-Fashioned Christmas, so make sure, guys, after the chat, you head over to BookTrib.com. On the live chat page, comment to win, and you'll be entered for that giveaway. Welcome, Ellen. It's so great to have you here today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us about An Old-Fashioned Christmas and what led you to write your third Vermont book.
Well, so that's two questions. The first question is easy.
Okay.
Old-fashioned Christmas is sort of about how we can let the idea of the perfect Christmas get right in the way of the good enough one that's staring you in the face.
Right.
And the way this book happened was I was really working on my third book, which was a book about the marrying years of our adult children. Which my friends all seem to be screwing up, the Mothers of the Grimms, and I thought this was going to be a hilarious book. And my daughter was engaged at the time, and it was going to end at her wedding, and I figured we'd get up to a bunch of shenanigans. And we did get up to some shenanigans. She called off the wedding and broke up with the boy. So I couldn't finish that book. So I needed a new book. And I had been thinking a lot about how these weddings can mess up a family's Christmas for years. And,
Yeah.
the brides might not know how to throw a good party, but they have just dandy long memories. And a lot of my friends were getting in tiffs with these brides, and I could imagine Christmas being messed up in these families forever. So I didn't have that book to finish, and I decided to do a Christmas book instead and look at how we celebrate and how that colors our family life.
Amazing. So you've got some recipes in the book. What are a couple of your favorite ones that you feature?
Oh, well, you can't do Christmas without food, right? So there's so many. There's a great one, this nut roll that is my husband's grandmother's Slovak nut roll. It's in the fifth generation. Her mom taught her how to make it, and she had four daughters. She taught them, and then she taught me. I went to her house and begged her to teach me how to make it, so I could have it on the table for John every Christmas Eve, just like she had. And now our daughter's making it, and it's delicious and it's easy, and there's this wonderful sense of family when you're making it.
Amazing. So what was your process like for writing this book? And has it changed at all now that you've done your third one? Has your process changed? Are you still going about it the same way from the very beginning? What's that like?
They've all been really different. The first one, Mud Season, was more of a construction project in a way because I was doing it in retrospect. And so I was sort of putting together the pieces. I'm a memoirist. We tend to look at all the same questions novelists do, but through a narrow range of just a few characters.
Right.
And so the first one looked at family and business, and I had bought the oldest country store in America and run it promptly straight into the ground. And so it was really about that. The second one was start to finish as it was happening.
Okay.
And so Good Grief was a sort of a very easy kind of in the middle of the journey book, and I loved writing that. The Christmas book was completely different because I had this other book finished and ready to go, except I didn't have an ending because Hannah called off the wedding. It turns out you can't say to your daughter, "Honey, could you please marry that man so mommy could finish her book?" You can't say that. So the Christmas book, it was February when I had the idea, and so we recreated Christmas at our house last February. This is our second one this year, because we decided to do an illustrated. The publisher said, "Why don't you do an illustrated memoir, and we'll just sort of do a pictorial of it if you're going to have the food." And so that was a completely different experience, and I wrote it in a much more compacted time.
Okay.
But I had a ball doing it because it was Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. So you moved, just for anyone who's not familiar with your background, you moved from St. Louis, I think it depends on what part of the country you're from, to Vermont. What made you decide to make that move, and what's changed in your life since you did do it?
We were on vacation. We were a family of five, and we were in Italy at the time. We were playing that game that families sometimes play when they're on vacation. What would it be like to live here? And our daughter was about 12 at
Okay.
the time, and we were doing that. And she said, why do we always play this game on vacation? Could we really live anywhere? That was a question for the grown-ups. And as luck would have it, I was one of the grown-ups. And coming from a long line of overreactors, we moved to Vermont a year later.
Wow.
We really wanted to live someplace beautiful. We loved our lives in St. Louis. We loved the kids' schools and we loved our friends. But we would come home from every vacation and somebody would invariably get a little bummed out on the way back from the airport. I remember these Meineke muffler shops that seemed to be on every corner in St. Louis, and they just took on this metaphorical significance to me that I thought, oh my God, I live in this horribly ugly place with all these Meineke muffler shops, and sort of had an existential crisis around the muffler shops. And so we came to Vermont, which I think is one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Is it as storybook like as it seems? I mean, everything you see is just like the cover of your book, the sleigh rides and the beautiful snow. And is it exactly like that? Is that what you found when you moved?
Well, real life is not the same as the
Right.
thing that you talk about with your friends on Facebook, right? So real life is the sound of that old boiler chugging on the first day of winter, and I'm always so grateful when it comes on one more year. It's 30 years old, please, and it's this huge old big monster thing. I mean, the essentials of life in Vermont in the winter are heat, and shelter, but I mean heat is a huge thing that we focus on up here in the winter,
Yeah.
and so we don't so much talk about that. But there is so much about it that is truly beautiful. I mean, I walk out my front door and I look at the mountains. We live in a high sweet valley, and we are surrounded on all sides by the mountains. And
Mhm.
there's really never much anything wrong with me that view and a walk in the woods can't fix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you have snow, then we are happy for you because anyone from Massachusetts down does not. And it's going to be 70 this week. So,
The last 2 days, and it was beautiful, and it all melted today, just in time. I have a magazine shoot happening at my house today. Yankee
very
Magazine, which is a New
exciting.
England magazine, is doing a shoot for next December, and it's like summertime out there today. So,
Crazy.
I if they'd just been here yesterday.
Exactly. So you talk about the quote real Vermonters on your website. Can you talk about what that means exactly and do you consider yourself one now?
Oh gosh, no. We've only lived here 12 years. And our neighbors, I made the mistake of telling somebody once I was a Vermonter, and everybody in the room, first they were very offended. Few people laughed. Oh, that's so silly. I mean, you really can't be a Vermonter until you've been here 2 or 3 generations.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure that they count it then. The real Vermonters are, well, where we live, they are few and far between. We live in a tiny little village called Dorset, and most of the real Vermonters are not here anymore, but they are in the towns around us. And they sort of, they take the long view. The Vermonters have a wonderful sense of place and community that I did not experience in my life in St. Louis. They know how to they've been here a long time. Everything's been going along here for a long time, just the way it is, and everybody's happy with that. And the new people who move here don't always get that.
Mm.
We have invariably all these folks will move here because of how it looks and how beautiful it is. And they're here a very short amount of time, and they start writing letters to the editor saying, "We need street lights." Every single year we get letters to the editors about the street lights. We have stars. We don't need street lights.
Right.
But invariably this happens. So the real Vermonters just kind of look at those letters and giggle because they know there's still more of them than there are of the Flatlanders moving in, and they're not going to get street lights.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Do you have a group of authors, like a knit that you've become, maybe fellow Vermonters, as it is, just maybe like an author's club, or do you have anyone near you that you can bounce ideas off of?
So I sort of hate group activities. I'm one of those
Okay.
people. I've not. I've belonged to so many book clubs over the years, and I've never had a book club even that I really liked. I think I am really sort of a secret introvert. I look like an extrovert out in the world, but in reality, I like to sort of cocoon here with my people and my dogs and my cat and my chickens. And so no, I don't belong to an author's group. I read voraciously, and Vermont has a lot of great writers. We are blessed. New England is blessed with great authors. And I'm a big reader, but I am not a group joiner.
What are you reading currently, or what's on your TBR list, or what can you tell the readers out there to go grab?
So, yeah. So in my pile right now, the one I haven't started yet is Quill. What is the name of it? Prophecy of the Quill, something of the Quill. It's this interesting kind of literary, we should look it up while I'm talking to you because I'm getting the title wrong. Literary mystery about Shakespeare, and it looks fantastic. So I've got that in my pile to start. I just finished the new Ruth Reichel, which was my cooking year. It was about the year that the magazine folded. She was the editor in chief for Gourmet, and the magazine folded, and she sort of cooked her way through the year.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
all of those recipes and these little haikus about her mood and memory at the time. It's beautiful.
Mm,
I just finished that. That was terrific. And I am about halfway through. I have to look at my pile. I usually have three books going. You know, I have one going in the car, one going in my
exactly.
bedroom, and one going in the library. So I have to look and see what
Yep.
I've got going. That Ruth Reichel was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. And I
Okay.
just finished one by Quinn Cummings that was terrific too, about her year of homeschooling. It was hilarious. She describes
Okay.
herself as a homeschooler, but the kind of homeschooler who believes in fossils.
Oh, interesting.
She's funny.
So what's your typical day like in Vermont? I feel like that you've got so many different things going on. What do you do? How do you get through? Where do you fit in your writing?
So I also own a fundraising company and called Isabel Pratt, and we do fundraising for school and hospitals around New England and New York. So a lot of my writing actually happens when I'm traveling for my regular job. I'm on trains and I'm on planes,
Oh,
and I'm not somebody who goes out when she travels. So I'm in my hotel room alone at night, and that tends to be when I write. If I'm home, I love to write by my fireplace and sort of snuggled up with the dogs. Although I think I get more done when I'm on the road because
yeah,
there's less sort of calling me in the house.
of course, of course. So you also write on a blog, which is Mrs. Paparoff's Barn. What are
Okay.
some of the things you write about? What can people see if they come to your blog?
Well, so Mrs. Packroth was this woman who had a little junk shop, kind of a combination of a junk shop, antique store, and tag sale all in one. And I grew up going to her barns when I was a teenager and collecting. I loved her. And I loved the stories that all the things in those barns told. You know, as you walked around and you picked up a piece of mercury glass, I remember finding this great candlestick, and it was mercury glass, and it had lipstick on the corner of it, sort of
Hmm.
embedded into the glass. And I loved imagining the story behind that lipstick and that candlestick. So Mrs. Paparoth's Barn is a collection of stories like that. You know, it's a collection of little moments, vignettes that happen in your daily life, or at least that happen in mine. Some of them are hilarious. I tell the story on there about the time a fish fell on my windshield right after I moved to Vermont. This happens when you live in Vermont because in the spring, during mud season, when the rivers are rising, the hawks are diving down and grabbing fish because they can see them from the air,
Oh,
and then they fly, and they're slippery, and they fall out of their mouths and they smash on your
oh
windshield.
my
So
goodness.
there are stories like that. The first time it happened to me, I thought, you know, it was Job. I thought there was a plague of fishes falling out of the sky on my car.
Absolutely.
And I ran into the country store saying, "You're not gonna believe this! There's a fish! It fell on my car!" And they all laughed and said, "Yeah, it's a hawk." So
No,
stuff like
it's
that, the
normal.
slice of life is what you find.
Interesting. And actually, one of my questions was, what surprised you most about moving to Vermont? So I would say that probably takes the cake.
The big difference about living in Vermont and living in a city, you have all the anonymity in the world. You can go to the coffee shop and not see anybody you know.
Right.
You might not have a lot of privacy because you live kind of bumped up next to each other. It's just the opposite in the country here in Vermont. I have all the privacy in the world. I can stand out on my balcony in my white gauzy nightgown any day of the week. Nobody cares because nobody can see me. I'm in the middle of the woods. But dare I speak, just outside my driveway, the whole town knows about it by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We had not lived here very long, and I had occasion to meet the governor. I thought this was a big deal because I'd never met a governor before.
Right.
Vermont is, this big, and you run into the governor at the grocery store, but I didn't know that yet. And so I was very excited, and I was sort of fixing my hair because I wanted to introduce myself. And I went up to him and I said, and put my hand out and I said, "Hi, Governor, I'm Ellen Stimson." And he said, "Hello, nice to meet you." And he paused and he looked off for a second. He said, Stimson, are you the lady whose kid peed on his teacher's chair?"
Good to be known
I was
for.
that lady. What do you say to that? I said, "How in the hell did that get to Montpelier?"
Right.
But that's it. There is a complete lack of anonymity when you live in Vermont.
Okay. Wow, how interesting. Great stories. Um, so you took over, I believe you made a quick mention of this in the beginning, but you did take over a country store called the Lovely Quaint Country Store when you first moved to Vermont. You renamed it the Horrible Quaint Country Store, if I'm correct. And what's happened to that? What became horrible about it? And it sounds like it closed?
Yeah. It was actually called Peltzer's. I called it the Horrible Quaint Country Store. I also called it the Alamo, depending on my mood. But no, we sold it to these wonderful women who have done a great job with it. It's beautiful now. It's back. It's been there since 1817, and it's a terrific place to shop. I walk in there and I think, I'm so glad I don't own this. But they've done a great job with it.
Oh, good. Well, shout out to them for that. I'm going to take a couple of viewer questions because we've got a few here. So I'll start right off the top, actually. Connor is asking, I think in regards to an old-fashioned Christmas, do you have a favorite part of your book? Thank you, Connor.
Oh, I think I probably do. Hey, Connor, thanks. There's a part in there about the beauty shop. When I was a little girl, I used to go to the beauty shop with my mom every Saturday morning. My mom was born in 1923, and women in that era had a beauty shop, a standing beauty shop appointment every week.
Yep.
I mean, this was a woman who never went swimming without thinking about when her hair appointment. I don't think she ever took a shower because she was always worried about the hair appointment.
Yep.
But I loved going in November and December so much because all the women, the sorority of women, would come into that shop and they would bring their favorite cakes and pastries and candies, and they would feed them to each other and try them out for their table that year on their friends. And I loved that. And I loved the stories they would tell with the food they brought. There was a woman there. This was also back when you could smoke anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There was this woman named Naomi James, and she always had a cigarette hanging out of the corner of her mouth. And she was a kind of a rough talking woman, and she called you kid. And she brought in this beautiful coffee cake. And she said, "Hey, kid," and the smoke is billowing. "Hey, kid, taste this." And I took a bite. And when I took a bite, I watched her take a bite too. And she closed her eyes. And this very kind of rough and tumble woman softened right down. She closed her eyes and she said, "Kid, it tastes just like snow, doesn't it?"
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought it tasted like brown sugar and pecans, but that's because I wasn't in on the whole memory trip with her.
Right.
She told a story about when she was about 7 years old and she had gotten a bicycle for Christmas. She had gone into the kitchen and the bicycle was hidden Santa had hidden it behind the wood stove. And she begged her parents, "Please, please let me go ride it." And they said, "Honey, it just snowed. How about if we have breakfast first?" "No, no, no, please, please let me ride it." So they bundled her up to get her ready. And her mom said, "You're going to be starving here." And as she sat on the bike, she handed her a piece of that coffee cake. And it was snowing. She said, "Here, take this. It'll tide you over till breakfast." And so for the rest of her life, that coffee cake tasted like snow. And that's really what these women were doing. It was all a giant gesture of love, trying to create these lifetime memories.
Wow, what a great, great story. Um, Chelsea is actually wondering, what advice would you give someone who loves to write and wants to see their work published?
Uh-oh, I lost you.
Right? Am I there?
Oh, there you are.
There I am. Yay. So Chelsea, I'll ask one more time in case anyone else missed it too. Chelsea's wondering, what advice would you give to someone who loves to write and wants to see their work published?
Well, Chelsea, I can tell you what I did. So I finished my book and I hired an editor to edit it for me because I didn't think that I could see it clearly and I wanted a more polished product. And so I hired somebody that I found who edited it for me. And at the same time, I went to my shelves in my library and I looked at books that I thought were similar to mine.
Mm.
And then I looked to see who those authors had thanked. And three authors that I thought had written books similar to mine that I loved had all thanked the same woman as their agent.
Hmm.
So I thought, this agent likes books like I write. And so I went to her website. She had a very fancy pants website that said she only took authors by referral. And so I wrote her a letter about a couple of those other books that I'd read of hers, and she wrote me back. And pretty soon we were exchanging emails, and then I said to her, may I refer myself? And she said yes. And that's how I got my agent. And so that is what I think you should do. Get the book edited and then find books that are like yours and look at agents who've represented those books.
How interesting. Very, also, along the lines of don't give up. Don't let, just because she says, only by referral, don't let that stop you ever.
Right. That's right.
How often do you write? Actually, this is also Chelsea. How often do you write and do you have a schedule?
Oh, God. Chelsea, if you knew me, you would know I don't schedule much of anything. I am just not a timely kind of human being. I write either A, when I have a project and I'm working on it, so I'm thinking about it, or I write when the mood strikes. So if I'm traveling, I often write and spend time thinking about, I'm missing home. I wish I was there.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about what's happened in the last month and I write about that. I write when the mood strikes, sort of like I do everything else. I mean, I admire those people who say, oh, I get up every morning and I put in my 2 hours or my 3 hours. And I don't know any of those people. I read about them. And I can't even imagine what they eat. It's that foreign to me.
Okay, very interesting. Well, I guess that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, how did you get into writing? Has this always been a passion of yours? Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about your background.
So I think I've always written. I always wrote as a child, and then I grew up and I had a blog when blogs became popular. That seemed like a fun thing to do. I'll tell you what happened to me, and I know this hasn't happened to you. I turned 50, and 50 got my attention in a way no other birthday ever had.
Ooh.
I'm not sure why. I mean, it's half of 100. Who's going to live to be 100? Maybe it's because 37 and a half just doesn't have the same ring. But it did get my attention, and my mother had recently died. And I'd read an article in the Atlantic that said that women who were born during the decade of the 1960s, like I was, we were living on average 3 years longer than our mothers. Yeah. So my mom died when she was 84. So 3 years longer would have put me at 87. And I thought, well, 87, But those last few years have been kind of a hot mess. So I thought maybe I could just get to 80 and that'd be great. Right. I'd have 30 good years.
Right.
I don't drink, I don't smoke. Cheese is kind of a hobby of mine, but except for that. And then I did the math, and 30 years was only 1,560 weeks. Mm. And I thought, oh my God, I've only got 1,560 weeks left to go. And I went to bed pretty depressed that night, actually. But then I woke up in the middle of the night. The best thing happened. I realized it was only April. My birthday wasn't until August. I had 17 free weeks. It was like a death row reprieve. So I thought, I have to do something really important with these 17 weeks. And as a girl who had been drunk on book love all her life, I decided I was going to write a book. And so that was what made me sit down and put it together, the first one.
Wow, that's such another great story. That's fantastic. I'd love to talk about your other two books because they're also memoirs chronicling Vermont and your move. Mud Season and Good Grief. Can you talk a little bit about each of those and kind of the heart of those stories?
So Mud Season is hilarious. Can you say your own book is hilarious? Mud
Yes.
Season is hilarious. It's really about our family's move from the city of St. Louis to the mountains of Vermont and all the shenanigans we got up to once we got here, including buying that oldest country store in America and kind of ruining it for a time before the good ladies bought it and re-energized it. So that's the story of Mud Season, and it is hilarious. And I want to just a shout out to all the independent booksellers who worked so hard to put that book on the New York Times list. And I really believe it was the independent booksellers that did it. Most of us are not John Grisham. We need booksellers and folks like you guys at BookTrib who put our books in the hands of readers by helping us talk about them. So thanks to you and thanks to all the independent booksellers.
Absolutely.
And then Good Grief was really sort of an extension of that. You know, it was the story of, here's a complicated sentence. I was married to my oldest son's father for about 15 minutes when I was 22. Got that?
Got it.
And then I married my husband that I'm married to for life, and we've been together for 28 years. And we had a child. We had Benjamin, and he died suddenly and shockingly 3 years ago. And John and I never imagined that we were going to be teaching the kids about grief with one of the people on the parenting team. Steve and I could not be married, but he was a great co-parent. My other kids called him Uncle Steve, and he let himself into our house on Christmas morning. He'd unlock the door and start the coffee so that Benjamin didn't have to go more than one place for Christmas. Oh. So he was really a member of the parenting team, and then he was dead, and the grandparents were still alive. So we were faced with teaching the kids without really having experienced much of it ourselves. And it's really that story. Not only did he die, but he left me in charge of his estate. And then what that meant was I wound up with his ashes. What do you do with your ex-husband's ashes, I ask you? I can tell you that if you put them in your utility closet next to your vacuum, your house will get dirty because you'll never want to go in there. And so Good Grief is really the story of us working our way through that year together with Steve and figuring it out. And it's also hilarious. I mean, I know it's a weird thing to say, but it is I think people tend to look at life. I'm developing this theory that it's kind of like going to the movies. This theory just came to me because I went to Star Wars last night. And you know how some of us love big blockbusters. Right. Some people like horror movies. And some people like romance.
Absolutely.
And I like comedies. I like funny stories. And so we sort of tell our stories to ourselves, I think, in that way, the same way that you like the movies. I like funny stories. So we tell ourselves our stories in a funny way. And yes, it was about grieving, but it was funny.
Amazing. They sound fantastic. And those stories, there's something about the way you tell your stories, regardless of the topic. Maybe it's your delivery and your writing, but there's something about the way it just like draws you in. It makes you want to hear the story, and then the story turns out unlike you would expect it to, which is even better.
Can you just follow me around and say that to everybody wherever we go?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Sunny May, I'm going to put a question up from Sunny May because it's quite interesting. Has anything disastrous ever happened to your writing?
No, it hasn't. I realize that so many people have lost stuff from their computers, and I've never had that happen. I've been so lucky.
Knock on wood.
I know. I always forget to back up. I never do that. I do send myself emails every once in a while with my writing, but no, I've been very lucky.
Oh, good.
I wonder what happened to Sunny that made her ask that question.
I don't know. Although it sounds like some of the stories that you've had have been disastrous enough, so you've had enough for one lifetime.
We did have kind of a funny story, though, around Good Grief that wasn't exactly around the writing, but, well, sort of. Okay, so I'll tell you this. So I didn't have an ending for that book because the idea was that we were going to end the book with us scattering the ashes. Okay. And my oldest son, Benjamin, kept not being ready. And I would say, honey, what do you think about this weekend? And he'd say, no, I don't want to think about it. I'm not ready. And I've done therapy. I knew I had to wait till he was ready. Mm-hmm. But, I'm stuck with the ashes in the meantime.
In the closet with the vacuum.
Right, in the closet. Exactly. And so I've got this book, and Norton was ready to publish or ready to put out the ARCs, the advanced reader copies, which are what are sent to the reviewers and sent out to bookstores before they order. And I still didn't have an ending for this book. And so they were about to publish the ARCs with the last 10 pages blank because I figured eventually he would scatter them. Well, my husband said, wouldn't it be funny if we could just send Steve's ashes with all those advanced reader copies out to all those reviewers? Then we could get rid of him. And I thought that was hilarious because, you know, my husband has black humor and so do I. And so I told this to the sales manager at Norton, and he thought it was hilarious too. And the next 2 days later, a UPS truck showed up in my driveway, and he had sent me 2,000 little glass vials as a joke. And I thought this was hilarious. So we had tags made for those 2,000 little glass vials that had a picture of the cover of the book, and it said, author's dead ex-husband, please scatter somewhere. And we filled them with fireplace ash. And I sent them back to New York, and New York sent them out with the advanced reader copy. Well, let me tell you, Twitter and Facebook went crazy about this thing.
Yeah.
And they had an interactive map on the website that booksellers could go on and say where they had scattered Steve. So he was in California, he was in Hawaii, he was in Oregon, he's all over the place showing up on this map. And now people are talking about, who is this woman, this ghoul that could send her child's father? You know, it's all over Facebook and Twitter. And the New York Times called me. First time the New York Times had.
Oh my goodness.
And this reporter who was about, I don't know, sounded like he was 12 years old, he said to me, did you really send your children's father's ashes? And in a moment of what I can only describe as sort of sales brilliance, I said, my lawyer has advised me not to answer.
Oh my
crazy. It was the best thing I could have done to the book. And as a result, my son said, you know, everybody else is scattering him. I guess we can too. And so we scattered him at the river that next weekend. And finally, I had an ending to the book. So it wasn't a disastrous thing that happened to the writing, but it was kind of a funny thing.
Oh my goodness. How fantastic. That's so great. Well, I kind of wish we had gotten an arc now. We're going to have to be on the next list. I'm sure you'll come up with something great. So tell me what you have coming up. Do you have any upcoming projects, anything down the pike that you're working on, or maybe there's other genres you want to do or try out? What's happening for you in 2016?
I've got 3 projects. So I've been working on a novel for about a year, and it turns out I am a terrible novelist. So I threw away one, and I've got another one that I'm working on, and I don't think it's much better than the one I threw away. So that's kind of hanging out there. And then I have this book again about the marrying years of our adult children. Mm-hmm. And I think that one is it's called Wear Beige and Keep Your Mouth Shut, which is what I think we really should do when our kids get married. And that one's happening. And then there's a third one that I'm working on that is kind of the same thing as Christmas, only looking at family vacation. Our family has vacationed the same place every year for years and years and years. And so I'm sort of looking at that tradition and how that plays out in families. And you can't have vacation without food either. So there might be some food in that one.
Yummy. Sounds good. All right, Ellen, before we let you go, we're going to do a quick rapid fire just because it's so fun. And also, I just want to remind everyone before we do say goodbye, because unfortunately our time is almost up, that Ellen is giving away an old-fashioned Christmas, a copy of her book. Head over to BookTrib.com, and on the live chat page, comment to win underneath. Okay, rapid fire. Here we go. Hard copy or ebook?
Okay. Hardcover.
Writing at night or during the day?
Night.
Cooking or baking?
Oh, that's a hard one. Both.
Ooh, sleigh rides or snowball fights?
Sleigh ride.
Gingerbread or chocolate chip cookies?
Chocolate chip cookies. Chocolate? Chocolate? Come on.
Chocolate, obviously. Thank you so much, Ellen. This was a blast, and I want to thank you and also for joining us on our final live chat, everyone. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thank you so much for all of the support in 2015, and we are looking forward to an exciting 2016, so make sure you stay tuned. Thank you again, Ellen. Have a great day, everyone.
having me. Happy Christmas. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.